Welcome to the People's First podcast. Today we have Zeeshan Javed, Head of Marketing, Media, Performance and Analytics at Foxtel Group. Now, Zeeshan, you bring a wealth of experience in leadership, marketing strategy and data analytics. You also have a career that spans over 19 years as well. I mean, I'd love to start with any key moments that led you to your current role at the Foxtel Group.
Yeah, I always think it's always good to start right at the beginning.
Yeah.
And this was right out of college, trying to find my feet. And initially I was going for only finance type roles. And about 3 months into my first finance role, I realized how bored out of my mind I was. I could not for the life of me stand the job. I was like, there has to be something more. There has to be an interaction with people, something where I can actually meld data, but in a more like creative manner. And in came an agency called iProspect, which at the time was the original search engine marketing company.
Wow.
And I was employee like 66 globally at the time. New emerging industry. I mean, you try to explain anything back home, nobody had any idea what digital marketing was. So that was a good start.
Yeah.
But very quickly, first day, thrown into the deep end. The person I was replacing was actually leaving that day. So I had 24 hours to literally just pick his mind and get everything out about how to optimize campaigns and get the client, which was spending north of 400K a month, the best possible result. And my first question was, what is digital advertising?
And could he answer it?
He himself was still engaging that.
Yeah.
Because once again, this is industry at its infancy, right?
And what year was this?
This was 2007.
Yeah.
So it was just around the time where the only thing you could really do was like advertise on Google search. I mean, Facebook hadn't launched the advertising program or very early stages. There wasn't a whole host of like image results or all those sort of pieces. But very quickly, trial by fire, went in there, try to figure out what is the best possible way to break these campaigns down. And data was a big part of it.
Yeah.
Like understanding, okay, well, what's going to get them the best ROI? What sort of insurance products sell? And very quickly, I helped set them their most record-breaking month ever.
Wow.
And the price of doing something right is they actually give you something more. So they take that away and they give you the next big account and the next big account. Until finally, I was offered to head up the Staples business, which was the largest iProspect client at the time. And it was either that or take something that was going to come further down the road. And I had this belief that you should always take the opportunity that's in front of you. Don't wait for something bigger, because what if that doesn't come? And then you're like, okay, I'll regret this. Day one, probably the first and last time I ever questioned my management skills.
Yeah. Because
when you're thrown into your first manager role, I mean, you've got all of a sudden a team looking up to you, asking you for decisions. And on top of that, it's peak retail season 4 Staples at that time. But I said, okay, you know what? If I'm going to make mistakes, I'm going to own the mistakes and then just go into it.
Yeah, it's a lot of responsibility.
It's a lot.
You get thrown in the deep end when it comes to your first management role. I mean, what did you learn? What were your key takeaways from that particular role?
I think the biggest thing is you will make mistakes and that's inevitable, but also it's okay to feel like you have imposter syndrome or that you second guessing your decisions, but own the decision. Yes, if you make a mistake, guess what? You can figure out a way to improve it the same way you made it.
Yeah.
And so that was huge for me. And I had bless the team. Like they were amazing to work with. They took it on like in full stride. Within the first month, we exceeded Staples' annual goals, like for just that Black Friday period by 300% versus the year prior, both in revenue and sales. And that's when I believed that, yes, can do this. And so can the team.
Yeah.
And within the next 2 years, we grew from like a $13 million annual spend to almost 40 million. And it was intense. And it was, it was one of those moments where, you're like, okay, well, we've created this amazing monster almost.
Yeah.
But all monsters come at a price. And probably one of my advice for leaders out there is that know your limits and don't pass those too far because you will end up burning out. And that's what happened to me. I burnt out very early in my career. And I'd made the decision at that point that, okay, you know what? It's not about working long hours or 7 days a week or whatever. It's about making the most of the hours that you do have and getting the most outcome within those hours. And that's it. There's a new day tomorrow to continue. Look, we're not, neurosurgeons, and we're not like trying to save lives here. At the end of the day, it is advertising.
That's my favorite saying, is we're not saving lives. And that's the truth. So you can't live and breathe, spend 24/7 working away. It's that productivity level that you spend and you put your effort into the time that you have at work.
That's it. That's absolutely it. So, I mean, as time went on and as I forayed through different agencies and different roles, I reached a point where I said, okay, now I've gotten the work approach figured out, but what's my next big challenge? And at the time it was like 2012, I remember it. And I was thinking, okay, where do I go to next? So I said, okay, you know what? Let's pick a different market for personal reasons and for professional ones. And I closed my eyes, took a world map, put a finger on it. That was North Korea. And I said, okay, well, we can't go there. So let's find something else. And then Australia came up.
Very different places.
Very different places. So took a full chance. And I said, okay, look, let's, it's an emerging market. There's a chance to make a real imprint in digital advertising when I get there and help evolve the industry to what it can become. So I said, okay, let's do this. So packed my bags, joined iProspect over here. And then started a few other set of agency jobs. And as I went through those, I mean, it was a lot about team development. And, agencies, look, they're notorious for high amounts of attrition because your talented people will move on. And you'll have some people who just won't feel that the industry is the fit for them. And so you try to constantly rebuild teams. And, at times it can be draining, but no two teams are alike. And I think that was the other big lesson that I learned very early on is that when you're trying to build a new team, you shouldn't try to make it a carbon copy of the last one because you can't.
Yeah.
I mean, we're dealing with human beings. There's nuances and behaviors.
Different personalities.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you ultimately build a team that fits the purpose and don't try to build it too quickly because you're not just trying to get people to do tasks. You want them to help evolve the product, right? I mean, otherwise there's no point to this.
Yeah.
And then after, 14, 15 years in agency side, I said, okay, it's time I really wanted to move client side because at agency, you always get one part of the pie that you get exposed to. You never get the full picture. And the curious person that I am, I actually wanted to see end to end. And so Foxtel opportunity came up. And the first thing, learning from my past lessons, I said was, okay, well, you know what, if you're going to have me be your head of media performance analytics and the type of, insights you want me to help drive for your media strategy, you're going to have to give me the time to do it. So 90% of your meetings, I will decline. And I want to know right now if you're cool and comfortable with that. And they're great business. Look, I will say this, when it comes to embracing innovation and change, they really help support their employees in that way.
Yeah.
So I got to really work on a lot of incredible projects. First, it was the advancement of some of our analytic capabilities of how we measure online activity. And then it was, okay, well, let's introduce market mix modeling to the mix. And that was incredible because it went from a group of us that were actually looking at market mix modeling to using that to inform how we buy media, both offline and online. And then it became even the steering decision-making tool for the company when planning budgets across brands across the years.
Yeah.
So it has the, like data analytics, that's one of the most beautiful things I've found and discovered about it is that there's beauty to what data-led decision-making can do as opposed to finger in the air. I mean, there's a place for instinct.
Yeah.
But data doesn't lie. Math doesn't lie.
No, the numbers are there and they always tell a story as well. I think that's what we're hearing from a lot of our CDOs that we chat to as well, Zeeshan. And I think the interesting thing with Foxtel, I remember when I was first exposed to Foxtel, it was this leader in kind of that cable TV space initially when it first started, but it's grown so much more since then, hasn't it?
It really has. I mean, our subscriber base and our performance as a company is at its highest levels ever. And it's really come down to our ability to pivot. If you think about like what Foxtel was about 5 years ago, a lot of people were, counting us out. They were saying, Foxtel's the dinosaur, and paid subscription TV and everything is done because you've got your Netflix and Disney Pluses and Paramounts and everybody else entering the market. And, obviously different price points, different behaviors. But we said, okay, well, you know what? We can either sit here and be idle, or we can actually be innovative in how we tackle it. And so were born the products of Binge and Kayo. And Kayo, for me personally, it's one of my favorite products, just the aggregation of sporting content. If you're a sports lover, it's everything that you want in every single sport, and you'll start following sports you didn't even know existed.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
It's beautiful. And, we've got more innovation coming up. I mean, we've got Hubble coming later this year, which, that's going to be a beautiful foray into personalization of streaming TV. And it's kind of this new move into streaming aggregation, where it's no longer about just, how many services individually you may have, but it's almost like bringing all the different streaming services, whether they be Foxtel or otherwise, together under one roof, so that fundamentally the customer that we advertise to, they're at the forefront of the content they're receiving. And at the end of the day, it's all this has ever been about is entertaining people. And I know during COVID, we entertained a lot of people because you couldn't leave the house. There was nothing else to do.
Exactly. And I think the cool thing about that is having everything under the same roof is it's a dream for advertisers as well, isn't it, really? Because everyone's going to that kind of thing. They want to be able to, if their customers are all going to the same place to watch something, then it's fantastic. They know how to reach the customers firsthand.
No, absolutely. And I think the data possibilities are endless out of this, especially in terms of addressable media. If done right, and obviously within all the privacy consents, because that's one thing we take very seriously, is that, it's not just collecting data for the sake of collecting data. It has to be private, secure, and that's something we the policies extend all the way up to parent company.
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, with the right data, we can give you the right information at the right time that you need. Because, somebody once told me, they said, okay, well, I don't want you to collect my data. And, what would happen if you stopped doing that? And I said, okay, well, do you wear heels? And he said, no. And I said, well, that's the type of ads you will get. Because if you don't consent to certain amounts of data being collected, you can't personalize the results. So you'll get served ads for products that mean nothing to you.
Yes. And it's not something you want to see on your screen.
No,
it's not. You don't want to see ads about, I don't want to see ads about heel. I mean, I do because I wear them, but I don't want to see ads about, I don't know,
random
men's
products,
shoes.
right?
Yeah. I don't want to see that. So it's that targeted results. So no, you make such a good point there. And I think what I'd love to know from you is during all this change at Foxtel Group, how do you lead a team through so much change?
I think it comes down to two things. One is believe in the change that you're about to make and, support that change. Because a lot of times what happens is there's almost like a half-hearted approach to change, where they say, okay, well, we want to change. And then, the moment things start getting a bit dicey or a bit tricky, they say, okay, you know what, let's go back to the default old way of doing things. So you can't, change is it's a full-time job. You can't just embrace it half. So that's one thing Foxtel done really well. The other thing from a team leadership is that you can't have a vision right at just the top of the organization. That message of change and that the catalyst and the change management has to be done all the way to the lowest levels of the organization, down to the people who make our organization as great as it is at the day-to-day level, because they're the ones that do the hard yards. They're the ones that keep us on air, and make sure that customers hear about our products. And that's what I would say is something we've tried to do is within the series of changes that we have made, we've gotten the entire company involved. So, a company with a single unified vision or goal is more likely to achieve that vision or goal than one that has many visions that are just not disseminated right.
Yeah, and it's a large company as well. So I guess what's important is that communication amongst groups and teams as well. I mean, from your previous experience in agency work, how did that kind of inform your current role?
I think the biggest thing is you get used to change in agency land. You've got multiple clients that you're working on who have marketing strategies that pivot at a moment's notice, and you have to come up with entire new advertising plans.
You have to adapt.
You have to adapt.
Yeah.
And I think what agency side really taught me and really helped me over my career was it taught me to be resilient to change and figure out, how we can actually move forward from like, if we are changing, it's not that change is bad. Change can be scary. It doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
Just, it tells you, understand the reason for the change. Is it a good one? If it's not a good one, call it out. If it is a good one, figure out how you can even make it better.
Yeah, definitely. And look, I'd love to talk about data as well. And we know that data is just vital, as you touched on, in your position where you're at, and especially providing those insights to advertisers. But I mean, how much do you use data in just your daily life? Do you find that it's just becomes entrenched in what you do?
I'll tell you a funny story, and this probably goes back to early days of data. My father was trying to convince me at that time to get married. And he's an accountant. And the first thing I did was I said to him, Dad, I'm going to make you a balance sheet to show you why it is not feasible for me to get married right now. and that was my...
We can tell you work in finance.
Exactly. So, but it resonated, right? I mean,
Yeah.
and that's what it is. I mean, there are certain people in the organization that are going to be commercial oriented, and you have to talk to them with numbers.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, any business ultimately, if I'm very honest, is going to be in the process of making a profit. I mean, I'm not saying that everybody wants to make a huge profit, but ultimately that's the goal of business, right? To succeed, to be profitable so that you can build it further and while satisfying your customers. And the only way you can actually convey the technical bits of what you can do to make that happen is to present data in the right way. And that's something that, I like to believe that every data person in an organization needs to be a natural storyteller. People talk to me about, is there a role for a data translator within a company? And I said, no, everybody should be a data translator. And the way you do that is you increase data literacy in the organization. And that's one thing that, I've tried to do in my role is that with the people I work with is lead them through the process of, here is the data, this is what it means, this is what you can do with it, and this is the key takeaway that directly applies to your line of work. And rather than building 50, 60 page death by PowerPoint decks, I always went for the, here's the one slide.
Yeah.
This is what I'm trying to do. This is the impact from it.
And this is what you need to know.
This is what you need to know. And if they sign off on it, now you've already saved tons of headcount already or wasted head hours from trying to produce a document that's going to ultimately probably not even achieve the same result.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think other companies often underestimate data literacy amongst the whole enterprise as well?
I definitely think so. I think a lot of organizations believe that data is, it's a bunch of information, but it's not really used in the decision-making process, right? I mean, data has to be ingrained in every decision that a company makes because it's truth.
Yeah.
And as I said earlier, there is place and time for instinct, but more than anything, you have to really use the numbers or the information that you have available to you to inform strategy. Led from that, it's going to hit better.
And working in agency and then moving, obviously, to the Foxtel group, the media industry is a whole nother ball game as well because of how much change we're experiencing. Where do you see it moving? Have you got any kind of thoughts on the future of our media industry?
Well, let me say this to start with. I love the media industry. It is absolutely, the amount of change, the content, there's a lot of glitz and glamour to it.
Yeah.
And you get to do some of the things that you would normally do for home, but you're getting paid for it.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
But where I see it moving is that, you have a lot more entrants in market already. Eventually, the future is going to be aggregation and you're going to see partnerships build. Because it's not sustainable. Look, Disney is probably the only one that I would say has a catalog that's big enough to live on as a single product. But if you think about like, all the different production studios, your Paramounts, your Warner Brothers and everybody else, their content is not limitless. And eventually what you're going to find is you're going to find like some of the big behemoths merging. You're going to find the other ones investing in streaming aggregation, similar to what Foxtel's doing, rather than try to, it's not about trying to compete with everybody. Sometimes it's just about, okay, well, how can we increase the collective game to bring a better, better result to the audience as a whole.
It's actually a nice sentiment in a way to think that it's actually not always about competing. It's about helping each other out, because at the end of the day, everyone does want content to watch. But do you find that, I guess, the point of difference is also maybe user experience as well?
User experience is huge. Take any clunky software that you've ever used. Why is it that Google survived all these years, but Alta Vista didn't?
Yeah.
This is for all the oldies out there like me. But it's because Alta Vista was it was a search engine that was very clunky to use. You wouldn't get the results. Google, single page, single search bar that led you to the entire world.
So easy. And I think of Ask Jeeves as well, another one, exactly. Yahoo, which I think is still around, but it's not your first point of call. It's Google.
It's Google. And that's the thing. It's like when a brand becomes a verb, that tells you they're doing something right? Like I'll Google something or I'll Uber it. It's synonymous that like user experience makes all the difference on the stickiness of your product, because it's not just about the initial sale, right? You want to retain your customers, and retention's a big part of the game.
Yeah.
And long-term retention only happens if you can give them a suitable retention reason to stay.
Definitely. And I think with Foxtel, it's definitely a household name, I think, in Australia. And what did you know about Foxtel when you first moved here?
To be honest, when I got here, especially because, I came from America at the time. And so you had the Comcast and you had all these big DirecTV and all these brands there. And then I came here and there's Foxtel.
Yeah.
And you knew it was a streaming service very similar to what you knew of Comcast in the US. But, look, I'm as a Foxtel person, I'm not proud to admit it, but the first thing I did was actually I downloaded Netflix again.
Yeah.
Because that's what I knew. I used Netflix since the time when they used to send you CDs.
Yeah.
And I've lost enough of them to know that. But what it came down to is like when I started working with them, that's when I really started to understand the brand. And this is what I meant. The move from agency to client side was that I really got to see the end to end. And I didn't care who I disturbed or who I met in the organization. I would literally just rock up to different departments and be like, okay, well, tell me a bit about what you're doing. And as I started uncovering the mission, the goal and whatnot, more and more I fell in love with the brand. And to me, like, it's a place that I definitely see myself for quite a long time.
Yeah. Sounds like you weren't afraid as well to say some things that you thought people might want to hear, as in, I can't come to these meetings, and important stuff that you believed in as well. And what advice would you give to someone else that might be in your position that thinks there's a few things I've got to do, but I don't know if everyone's going to like them initially?
Look, I'm a big believer that, it's better to be respected than to be liked. And I'm not saying that means that you can go out and be mean to everybody. But what it means is that if you're in an organization, look, my first boss at Foxtel gave me some very good advice. He said, don't become just another organism that's part of this organization. We hired you for a reason.
Yeah. Bring
that reason to life. And I thought that was very sound advice, because what it meant is that you're joining an organization, you have an ability to make change. Yes, your opinion on something might not be popular, but it doesn't mean it's not going to be right. And if it's something that ultimately will bring, profitability or even benefit to the organization, you would be doing your own job a disservice by never saying something about it.
Totally.
So don't worry about the repercussions. Don't scream at your boss or like senior ups.
Don't be an asshole.
Don't be an asshole. But at least have the conversation. What's the least that can happen? I remember one organization I worked for years ago. I asked, they had a huge presence on Google Cloud, and this project got canned. And 6 months into it, and I was just looking at the billings, and I kept realizing that they were getting billed almost about $300,000 a month in cloud costs. And I realized what would happen is that they shut down the project, they forgot to turn off the cloud storage. So every day there's calculations and processing and compute functions and things happening. Now I could just sit there for another 6 months and say nothing, but that's, 1.8 million that you're going to throw out the door.
Yeah.
So I, probably the person who least wanted to hear it, I actually raised it up to them. And a day later, they talked about how they saved the company $1.8 million.
Yeah. They would have been pretty thankful for you bringing that up, because it's a lot of money at the end of the day.
Is.
And human error does happen within companies. So things like this happen. But if you don't mention it, there's a lot of loss on the line, isn't there, really?
There is. And that's the thing. You can't. Look, if a place is for you and they will respect your opinion, that's the place you want to work anyway. If a place is going to, for simply raising alternate viewpoints, dismiss you, that's probably a good indication in your career that that is not the place for you.
Now, data, just to finish on data as well, do you find that the power of data is a great way of communicating as well with those leaders, those C-suite leaders?
It's not just about how the data, it's about how it's visualized. And I think C-suite leaders, look, I mean, do I believe that C-suite leaders as a whole across multiple industries should be more data literate? Absolutely. I think, in the world we're going to with, the foray of AI and the movements and everything else, you have to have some sense of data and what it enables. Do they need to know all the technical details? Absolutely not. But what it means is that the people that are technical need to present the data in a way that the other person can understand it. It's almost like the definition of communication, right? That the intended message that you intended to pass to the other person or convey to them is the exact same message that they received.
Yeah.
And you can do it in a whole host of different ways. I mean, look, AI and a whole host of new technologies have given an ability to present data in ways that wasn't possible before. I mean, not easily, at least. I mean, you had to be so skilled in all these dashboarding tools and whatnot, but now you can present all this wealth of information in a few button clicks and get your point across.
Yeah.
And if you can do that as an organization and you can, you enable data literacy throughout, I strongly believe that is when an organization is primed for success.
Yeah.
In Australia or anywhere.
And you bring up such an interesting buzzword as well, AI, generative AI. Is that something that you're looking at incorporating in the future, or is that something that's in your journey?
Look, I think what's interesting is, like, I know ChatGPT and Bard probably make it seem like AI has just come around to existence right now. It's simpler large learning models, but it's been around for a while. And I think in some capacity, like, from advertising optimizations down to, how offers are served or whatnot, there's been some elements of that machine learning based automation for years.
Yes.
But I would say, is it going to continue to make an impact? Absolutely. I mean, I think, as an organization, bring AI for the sake of fulfilling a purpose. And I think probably the most important thing I'll say today is this. If you do not have purpose to the tech that you're bringing in, then it is absolutely pointless. I mean, I remember talking to one gentleman in another organization, and he said that, they gave him, full access to ChatGPT, the premium version. They've given him all these tokens, and they've even given him an entire team to develop out AI. And I said, okay, well, what's your use case? And he's like, that's what I'm actually here to talk to you about, because I absolutely have no idea. So I said, they've given you this nice Rolls Royce without any purpose behind it to begin with.
Yeah, you don't know why you have it.
and that's just like, the shiny toy that's going to sit in the garage forever.
Yeah.
And so that's why I would say, like, look, if you're going to bring or integrate AI functionality to your organization, one, make sure you bring in somebody who actually truly understands this. Not the one person who used ChatGPT and is now an AI evangelist, but someone, but you have to have a purpose to the tech and make sure you use it in the right way.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to have a why, that's for sure. And look, Zeeshan, thank you so much for joining us on the People First podcast. Your insights have been invaluable for us today, and it's just so fascinating chatting to someone, I guess, on the forefront of digital analytics. So thank you for your time.
No, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this.